Wasted potential. Time and time again, as comic book fans, this is a term that we hear all the time, whether it's a movie sequel that we never got, another season of a TV show that left off on a cliffhanger. There are countless amounts of times that this happens, and that is why on this channel, I have started a series where I talk about wasted potential and what could have been. And honestly, in the past, some of the entries, although they are bittersweet, there is a silver lining in a lot of them, because there is a chance that they do come to fruition. Young Justice, Teen Titans, even Spectacular Spider-Man doesn't seem fully outside of the realm of possibility. Now, when I talked about the Snyderverse, obviously, that is 100% dead. However, that being said, this one I'm going to bring up today is 100% in that category, and that is a real shame, because today we are talking Superman and Lois. What could have been. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Superman and Lois, what could have been. Now, as many of you may know, it was a show that premiered on the CW. We did end up getting 4 seasons, and they were able to, at the very least, end the show. Now, the initial plans for the show were not 4 seasons. It was actually supposed to be much longer than that, and season 4 was a shortened season. Unfortunately, something that often happens when we talk about comic book projects, they are at the mercy of the network or the studio or the company who is licensing and producing said show or movie universe, and that is 100% what this show fell into. The CW went up for sale, and the CW network that ended up getting bought out, I don't even know the company name, it is no longer the CW, but they are not doing any type of scripted content anymore, any type of superhero content anymore. It's essentially a reality channel now, which is a real shame, because Superman and Lois got great ratings. It was consistently the #1 or the #3 show on the network, and it had a very consistent audience and viewer count, which again, that just makes it even more of a shame, because it wasn't like it didn't do well as far as ratings, it didn't earn money. Now, one of the things that does go against this show is how expensive it was. However, if you watch an episode of this show, and then you comparatively watch it to any other CW superhero show. And again, I'm a big fan of Arrow. I'm a big fan of Flash, especially the early seasons. However, those shows never came close to the type of scenery, cinematography, moments that literally looked as if they could be in an actual movie. This show was spectacular at giving us epic moments and made us really feel like Superman was out there doing those things. It was great. That being said, the initial plans that we were going to get into, as I said, was not to end it after 4 seasons. They were going to do at least 7 seasons. Yes, when they initially pitched the show, they had a 7-year, 7-season plan. So again, the fact that we got robbed of 3 seasons, and realistically it's about 3.5 seasons, because season 3 and season 4 were going to be much different than they ended up being. And as we know, season 4 especially was cut down to only 10 episodes. And again, I know season 1 and 2 were only 15 episodes, but still, that's a third of the show that is now gone. So that definitely does limit your ability to tell very good, thought out stories. So right off the bat, that's already a big change. Obviously, there were budget cuts. However, I'm really impressed with how they handled it, and that's saving the budget for certain episodes and certain fights. And it gave us episodes with no fights, and honestly, I would prefer that to having a fight every episode that just looked horrible or looked atrocious, did not look up to par with what we've been used to for Superman and Lois. That being said, the events of season 1 and 2 were obviously going to stay the same. The storylines with the Other Earth, Bizarro Superman, with Superman's brother, who's disguised as Morgan Edge, that was all going to remain the same. Even a lot of season 3 was going to be the same. The only major difference was going to be in the end. They were not going to do the death of Superman in that season. Instead, it was going to be a story about Bruno Mannheim, which obviously we got, and Lex Luthor. Yes, he was set to be the big bad main villain of season 3 that would have propelled us into season 4. we would have been left off with a cliffhanger to where Lex Luthor, obviously as he did, he ended up escaping. However, instead of sending Doomsday after him, it would have been slightly different. I saw a couple reports out there about potentially Metallo being one of those villains that he ends up sending after Superman, and they did toss around the idea of, in season 4, giving Lex Luthor an opportunity to run for president, and that would have been the storyline. Again, there are a couple different reports regarding season 3 and 4. Those ones aren't as concrete. However, if we got a storyline in which we saw Lex Luthor become the president, and then let's say season 4 was him setting all these laws that made it so difficult for Superman, or even a Public Enemies situation, like in the animated movie, where Lex Luthor is now essentially putting out a bounty on Superman, that would have been awesome to see, especially in this universe where they did such a great job fleshing out all the characters and giving pretty much everyone storylines that we care about. The other major change from season 4 would have been Jonathan Kent. He was not going to get his powers in that season. They were going to leave it at a much, much later date. That being said, Jordan was going to get his supersuit in season 4, and he was going to start being Superboy with Superman in that season. I know a little bit he started to, especially at the tail end of the season. However, he was going to get his comic accurate suit, and they were going to be a father and son duo that went out and fought crime. That being said, we did get somewhat of 2 teasers in season 4, and that obviously goes into what they were going to plan to do. However, by that point, they already knew season 4 was the end, so they were just little nods to the storylines they were going to have. One of which was going to be Brainiac. As we know, the one person who was working for Lex Luthor in season 4 was really Brainiac. He was going to be revealed to be working behind the scenes, manipulating Lex Luthor and taking advantage of Lex Luthor's hatred of Superman to then try to take over Lex's company, get a handle on all of Earth's information, and find a way to put Superman in a position to where he could download part of his DNA so that he could evolve himself. And a lot of different storylines, like I know they did this in the Justice League animated show, where they had Brainiac need some of Superman's DNA to make himself evolve. It was one of his limitations because he was built by Jor-El. That was going to be another major tie-in. They were going to delve a little bit deeper into Jor-El and Laura. I know they did that a little bit in season 1. However, again, after season 1, we never saw Jor-El again because his consciousness was deleted. That being said, being able to see their version and their iteration of Jor-El and Laura come together to create Brainiac together and then see the downfall of Krypton because of Brainiac would have been really, really awesome to see. There were some teases in season 6 for a potential War World storyline, which again, if anyone has followed me at all on this channel, I have wanted the War World and Mongol in literally everything. Any type of teaser we get for any Superman project or potential tease of a villain, I want Mongol. We have not ever seen Mongol in any live action project, and I want him so badly. He's so cool, so badass, and he is a physical threat to Superman, and his very ideology goes against everything Superman is. He enslaves people. He uses other people to get himself ahead, and he doesn't care about their day-to-day needs. So the fact that we haven't got that yet in live action is a shame, and the fact that we could have gotten some storyline to that nature in Superman and Lois, especially in season 6, would have been awesome. Now that being said, I say there isn't anything concrete on that because season 6 was going to somewhat be split into a 2-part season. Now, I don't mean they were going to release half the episodes and then do a break and then release the other half. No, I mean they were going to do 2 separate storylines similar to how they did Bruno Mannheim in season 3. That being said, we do know what they were going to do, especially in the latter half of it, and it was going to set up the finale. Now, as we know, Gordon Godfrey, who was played by Tom Cavanaugh, everyone was hypothesizing who he was going to be. He was supposed to be a major character. however ended up just being a cool little Easter egg. Gordon Godfrey is always associated with Apocalypse and Darkseid. That is the storyline they were going to go with. However, it wasn't just going to be a run-of-the-mill Apocalypse storyline. I know Smallville touched on it a little bit, however, they were way more limited because Tom Welling never put on the actual suit. I know in the finale he quote-unquote did, but he didn't. It was CGI. He's confirmed this in many interviews, unfortunately. That being said, we were going to get a full-fledged Apocalypse storyline. I'm talking Gordon Godfrey, Granny Goodness, the Furies, Darkseid, Steppenwolf. Even characters like Mantis were going to be teased and appear in this season. And they were going to go into the next season and build up the character of Darkseid to an eventual showdown between Darkseid and Superman. But not just them. By that time, Jonathan Kent was going to get his powers. It is stated to be right around the middle of season 6, he was going to find out he has powers. And in a battle with Darkseid, him, Superman, and Jordan were going to battle. And that would have been epic. Superman, with his super sons, with the craziest stakes we've ever seen, could have been achieved. Now again, I know I said season 6 and 7 are kind of up in the air. The other reports that I saw from the showrunner were that season 6 was going to be that Darkseid storyline, and obviously the Mongol storyline would get cast aside. I haven't found a ton on that one, so I lean heavier on this one, and Jonathan getting his powers at the beginning of season 6. Having that battle with Darkseid, everything plays out the same. And then season 7 would have seen the very beginning Doomsday arrive. And now this is a major difference because we know before he arrived in a finale, left us on a cliffhanger. However, this one, the cliffhanger was going to be Darkseid creating Doomsday. And then in season 7, he was going to send Doomsday after Superman. They were going to fight as a family. However, it was very clear. The two sons, Jonathan and Jordan, didn't stand a chance, so Superman took the battle elsewhere. And he did end up getting killed. And another major change from season 4 to what this was originally going to be is how long Superman stayed dead for. He was going to be dead for the entire season and only come back in the last 2 episodes. Now, outside of that, pretty much everything else was going to remain the same as far as him with his heart, exploring how he would age at a much quicker rate because of the heart he now had. However, that's still a very different thing because now you have both of the sons together out there as super boys, having experienced fighting alongside their father and now having to fill his shoes. They would have both had their comic book accurate super suits and been out there fighting crime. Now again, there's no confirmation as to what villains they would have fought or if it would have been anything major. The big plot point would have been filling the void that Superman left. That being said, I am so salty that we did not get this storyline. I love Smallville. I absolutely love it. However, if we got these 7 seasons, and obviously there was a potential to go even beyond that, but just these 7 seasons would have been, without a doubt, the best Superman show we have ever gotten, especially in live action. Again, obviously, that being said, hopefully the quality of the show would have remained the same, which again, because every season, in my opinion, was really great, I don't see any of it slipping. And just from a cinematography and movie level standpoint, it was amazing to see. So it would have been epic to see how they handled characters like Brainiac and Darkseid, which are traditionally very difficult to do in a TV show. However, I really do believe this show could have pulled it off, and it could have been absolutely amazing. But let me know what all of you think. Were you happy with how it ended? Or would you have preferred it getting this full 7-season treatment? And which storyline are you most bummed out that we didn't get to see? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.